Get off this property, now!
Ma'am, this is my house.
Your house?
She laughed the kind of laugh that's meant to cut.
Honey, I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. I've never seen you here once. You don't belong here. You don't look like you belong here. And I want you gone.
I've owned this estate for 3 years.
Estate? You're squatting. I'm calling the police. I'm telling them. There's an armed trespasser on a vacant property, and I want him removed tonight.
I'd rather you didn't do that.
Oh, I'm doing it, sweetheart. Get him out. That's exactly what I'm going to say.
2 deputies responded. The first one she didn't recognize. The second one looked at me, lowered his flashlight, and said,
Good to see you, sir.
He'd worked under me for 18 months. She didn't know I was a retired U.S. Marshal, but she was about to find out what that costs. Let me tell you about the quietest man in Beaufort County. James Beaumont spent 28 years as a United States Marshal, not the Hollywood kind with a badge in one hand and a speech in the other, the real kind. The kind who serves federal warrants at 3 in the morning, escorts witnesses across state lines in unmarked sedans, and stands 12 hours in a courtroom doorway without shifting his weight, because the judge inside just sentenced someone who swore revenge on his way out. 28 years, 4 presidential administrations, 267 fugitive apprehensions, 0 complaints in his personnel file. He retired at 56 with a federal pension, a box of commendations he never hung on the wall, and a quiet understanding that he'd earned the right to live exactly the way he wanted for the rest of his life. So he bought Whitfield. Whitfield is a 38-acre estate on the south bank of the Broad River in Beaufort County, South Carolina. The main house is a 3-story Georgian revival built in 1927 by a cotton merchant named Aldrich Whitfield. White brick black shutters, 12-foot ceilings, a wraparound veranda that faces the river, and the kind of staircase that makes you stand up straighter just looking at it. There's a guest cottage near the east tree line, a 6-stall horse barn with a copper cupola that's turned green over the decades, a spring-fed pond stocked with bream and catfish, and a 1/4 mile of live oak alley that runs from the front gate to the main house like a cathedral aisle made of wood and Spanish moss. James paid $5.2 million for it. Cash, no mortgage, no partners. He signed the closing papers the same week he turned in. His badge drove down from the Marshal's district office in Columbia with a truck full of boxes and a bird dog named Captain, and moved in on a Tuesday afternoon in October. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He'd grown up 40 minutes north in a cinder block house with a tin roof and a father who drove a propane truck. His mother taught 2nd grade at the elementary school until she couldn't anymore. James worked his way through the University of South Carolina on a Pell Grant and a dishwashing job at a rib shack on Hardin Street. He became a marshal because a recruiter at a career fair looked him in the eye and said, "You look like a man who finishes things." He never forgot that. Whitfield was the finish. The thing he'd pictured during the long stakeouts, the overnight transports, the years of government housing and per diem hotels. A place where the only sound at 5 in the morning was the river moving and the mockingbirds arguing about territory. He kept 2 horses, a chestnut quarter horse named Duke and an older gray mare named Pearl, who had more opinions than most people. He fished the pond on Sunday mornings. He read history books on the veranda. He cooked steaks on a cast-iron grill he'd welded himself from scrap steel in the barn. For 2 years, it was everything he'd earned. Then Palmetto Crest Estates went up next door. A developer out of Charleston named Greer Whitman Partners bought 110 acres of old soybean fields on the eastern boundary of the Whitfield estate and built 122 homes in 18 months. Mediterranean-style stucco terracotta roofs, 3-car garages, community pool, fitness center, wrought iron entrance gate with a fountain that looked like it belonged at a casino. The HOA dues were $480 a month, and the CC and Rs were 62 pages long. 62 pages of rules about mailbox height, fence material, lawn shade, trash can, visibility holiday decoration, timelines, and the approved list of exterior paint colors. 18 shades of beige and 1 shade of gray they called Coastal Whisper. James watched the construction from his veranda the way a man watches weather moving in from the west. Curious, not worried. His property was separated from the new subdivision by a tree line and 100 yards of unmowed field. He figured people would move in, wave politely, and leave him alone. He figured wrong. Patricia Davenport moved into Palmetto Crest in year 1 and became HOA president by year 2. She ran unopposed because she was the only person who wanted the job badly enough to knock on 60 doors and make it sound like a favor she was doing for the neighborhood. She was 53, platinum blonde, always dressed like she was about to walk into a country club luncheon, and she carried a leather-bound planner the size of a hymnal that she consulted the way other people check their pulse. She was also a licensed real estate agent. She sold 9 of the first 30 homes in Palmetto Crest and collected commissions on everyone. She served on the architectural review committee that she created. She appointed herself chair of the landscaping subcommittee that she invented. She hired her sister's husband to do the pool maintenance and her college roommate to manage the HOA's social media page. Every committee, every vendor, every decision ran through Patricia. She wasn't a neighborhood leader. She was a franchise owner who happened to live in the building. The first time James met her, she was standing at his front gate. He was coming back from town in his truck, a dark green F2-5, with mud on the fenders and a bag of feed in the bed, when he saw a white BMW X5 parked at the entrance to the Live Oak Alley. A woman in a navy blazer and cream slacks was standing on the other side of the wrought iron gate, one hand shading her eyes, peering up the driveway like she was appraising the property for a listing. James stopped the truck and stepped out. "Help you?" She smiled wide, practiced the kind of smile that sells houses. Patricia Davenport, HOA President, Palmetto Crest. She extended her hand over the gate like the iron bars between them were a formality. "I've been meaning to introduce myself. James Beaumont. This is private property." Her smile didn't crack. It just thinned at the edges the way veneer peels when you push too hard. "Of course, I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. I was here first." She laughed, a short, bright sound that had no warmth in it. "Well then, welcome us." She handed a business card through the gate bars. "If you ever think about listing this place, I'd love to have the conversation." James took the card, looked at it for exactly 1 second, and put it in the breast pocket of his flannel shirt, not because he intended to call, but because a marshal never throws away a piece of evidence before he knows what the case is. She drove away in a cloud of oyster shell dust. James stood at his gate and watched the BMW disappear around the bend. He didn't know her yet, but he knew the type. He'd spent 28 years serving warrants on people who believed their authority had no ceiling. Patricia Davenport had the same look in her eyes. The first letter arrived 3 weeks later. It came in a cream-colored envelope with the Palmetto Crest Estates logo embossed in gold, a stylized palmetto tree wrapped in a laurel wreath, because apparently an HOA in rural South Carolina needed its own coat of arms. Inside was a single page on heavy cardstock, typed in a serif font that looked like it was trying very hard to seem important. "Dear property owner." It began, not "Dear Mr. Beaumont." Property owner, like his name didn't matter. The letter cited 3 violations. First, unmaintained vegetation visible from community sightlines, meaning the 100-year-old live oaks that lined his alley. Second, agricultural structures inconsistent with residential aesthetic standards, meaning his horse barn. Third, absence of approved fencing along shared boundary, meaning the tree line between his property and their stucco paradise. The letter demanded corrective action within 30 days, or a fine of $250 per day would be assessed. It was signed by Patricia Davenport, President, Palmetto Crest Estates Homeowners Association. James read it standing at his kitchen counter with coffee in one hand and the letter in the other. He read it twice. Then he set down the coffee, opened the drawer where he kept his property records, and pulled out the deed. The Whitfield estate was deeded to James Allen Beaumont on October 14th, 3 years prior. The deed was recorded with the Beaufort County Register of Deeds. The property had been privately held since 1927 and had never, not once, not in any amendment, not in any filing, been included in any homeowners association, any covenant, any declaration, or any community agreement. The Palmetto Crest Estates HOA was incorporated 47 years after the Whitfield estate was first built. James's property predated their existence the way the ocean predates a swimming pool. He didn't call his attorney, not yet. He folded the letter, put it in a file folder, wrote the date on the tab, and put the folder in the bottom drawer of his desk. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived. Same envelope, same logo, same font. This one cited unauthorized commercial activity on residential adjacent property, meaning his horses. 2 horses, Duke and Pearl. The letter described them as a livestock operation that violated Palmetto Crest's environmental wellness policy. It demanded he relocate the animals within 14 days. A week after that, a third letter. This one accused him of inadequate perimeter lighting, contributing to community safety concerns. His estate had 12 exterior lights, all on timers. The Palmetto Crest entrance fountain used more electricity in one night than James's entire property used in a week. The fourth letter was the one that told James this wasn't about violations. It was about territory. It arrived on a Monday morning in a larger envelope, legal-sized, and it contained a 6-page document titled Voluntary Annexation Agreement. The document proposed that the Whitfield estate be formally incorporated into Palmetto Crest Estates, subject to all HOA covenants, dues, architectural standards, and board governance. The annual assessment would be $5,760. The agreement required James to submit all exterior modifications to the Architectural Review Committee for approval, the committee Patricia chaired. And it required him to grant the HOA a permanent easement along the eastern edge of his property for community trail access. At the bottom of page 6, there was a signature line. Patricia had already signed her half. James's line was blank, waiting. He sat on his veranda that evening, with the document on his knee and Captain sleeping at his feet. The river moved slow and dark in the October light. Somewhere across the water, a heron lifted off the bank and disappeared into the cypress trees without a sound. James picked up his phone and called an attorney named Harlan Griggs, a property law specialist out of Charleston who'd spent 30 years peeling HOAs off private land like barnacles off a hull. James described the letters, the annexation document, and the woman behind them. Harlan listened for 4 minutes without interrupting, then said, "Mr. Beaumont, that annexation agreement is worth less than the paper it's printed on, and the violation letters are harassment. Keep every single one." Harlan Griggs filed a formal response with the Palmetto Crest HOA within a week. It was 4 pages of South Carolina property law, so precisely cited that it read like a legal textbook with a personal grudge. The core argument was simple. The Whitfield estate had never been part of any declaration of covenants. The HOA had 0 jurisdiction over a non-member property, and any further violation notices or fines would be treated as harassment under South Carolina Code Section 16-3-1700. Patricia didn't respond. Instead, she pivoted. 3 days after Harlan's letter landed, James got a call from the Beaufort County Code Enforcement Office. A complaint had been filed alleging that his horse barn lacked a proper stormwater management plan, and that runoff from his property was contaminating the shared drainage channel between his estate and Palmetto Crest. The complaint also alleged that his horses created biohazardous waste conditions within 500 feet of a residential community. 2 horses on 38 acres, with a spring-fed pond that had been naturally filtering water since before anyone in Palmetto Crest was born. The code enforcement officer was a man named Ray Toombs, mid-40s, sun-darkened arms, the patient demeanor of someone who investigates complaints all day and knows that 90% of them are someone else's grudge wearing a regulation mask. He walked the property with James for an hour and a half. He inspected the barn. He checked the manure composting system. James had built a 3-bin rotating system with cedar walls and a gravel drainage pad cleaner than most restaurants' kitchens. He walked the drainage channel. He tested the water at 3 points. He counted the horses. Duke watched him with mild suspicion. Pearl ignored him entirely and checked James's veterinary records feed, storage, and pasture rotation schedule. When he finished, Ray stood by his truck and pushed his hat back on his forehead. Mr. Beaumont, this is one of the better maintained equestrian properties I've seen in this county, and I've seen a lot of them. Will it clear? I'll file my report by end of week, but between you and me, whoever called this in either has no idea what a horse farm looks like, or they know exactly what one looks like and filed this anyway to create problems. Ray drove away. James added the code enforcement visit to his file. The file was in the second drawer now. The first one was full. But Patricia wasn't done with county resources. Over the next 3 months, she filed 4 more complaints: noise, odor, fire, safety, and unpermitted structures. Each one triggered an inspection. Each inspection found nothing. Each inspector left, shaking their head with some version of the same sentence. "Your property is fine, Mr. Beaumont. I don't know who's filing these, but they're wasting everyone's time." The fire safety inspector, a woman named Davis, who'd been with the county for 20 years, actually pulled James aside after her walkthrough. "Sir, I shouldn't say this, but whoever's doing this is going to burn through their credibility with our office. We're required to respond to every complaint, but we track patterns, and this pattern is starting to look like targeted harassment." James thanked her. He added her report to the file. He also filed a Freedom of Information request for all complaints submitted to Beaufort County regarding the Whitfield property. The response came back in 9 business days, 7 complaints in 3 months. Every single one originated from the same IP, addressed the Palmetto Crest Estates HOA office computer, the computer that sat on Patricia Davenport's desk. James printed the FOIA response. He put it in the file. He closed the drawer gently the way you close a trap you don't want to spring yet. Meanwhile, Patricia was working the neighborhood. At the next HOA meeting, she delivered a presentation she called Boundary Concerns, Protecting Our Community Character. It featured photographs of James's property taken from the Palmetto Crest side, his barn, his fence line, his horses, even his front gate. She described the Whitfield estate as a non-conforming agricultural holdout that was actively depressing property values in the surrounding community. The vote to escalate boundary concerns to the County Planning Commission passed 28-11. Most people voted yes because they trusted Patricia, and Patricia had never given them a reason not to, at least not one they'd noticed yet. Patricia took her campaign public. She started a neighborhood Facebook group called Protect Palmetto Crest and posted daily updates about the agricultural threat next door. She shared photos of James's horses standing in the pasture, peaceful grazing animals, doing exactly what horses do, with captions like, "Is this what you want next to your children's playground?" She posted screenshots of county ordinances about livestock, setback distances, carefully cropping out the part that showed James's property exceeded every requirement by a factor of 3. She organized a community safety walk, a guided tour of the Palmetto Crest perimeter, where she pointed at James's fence line and told 37 residents that the property was under investigation for health code violations. It wasn't. Every investigation had been closed with clean findings, but Patricia understood something about information warfare that most people don't. The accusation travels faster than the retraction, and by the time the truth catches up, the damage is already done. 3 families listed their homes that month citing agricultural concerns in their disclosure statements. 2 of those families had never spoken to James, never visited his property, and had no direct experience of any problem. They left because Patricia told them to be afraid, and fear is the most efficient real estate tool ever invented. Guess who sold those homes? Patricia Davenport, licensed real estate agent. 3 sales. Average price $520,000. Her commission at 3%, $46,800. She was profiting from the panic she manufactured. James learned this from Harlan Griggs, who'd been quietly pulling MLS records and cross-referencing them with Patricia's license number. "James," Harlan said over the phone, his voice carrying the controlled anger of a man who's seen fraud before but never gets used to it. "She's not just harassing you, she's monetizing you. Every complaint she files, every scare she creates, every family that runs, she collects the commission on the way out. You're not her enemy, you're her inventory." That phrase landed in James's chest like a stone dropped in still water. "You're her inventory." He asked Harlan to keep pulling records, every listing, every commission, every MLS description. He wanted to know if Patricia had ever mentioned Whitfield or any feature of his property in her marketing materials. The answer came back in a week, yes. In 11 of her 14 Palmetto Crest listings, Patricia had included some version of the same line, estate-adjacent setting with mature tree canopy and pastoral views. She was selling his live oaks, his pastures, his river views, the very things she publicly called a nuisance as premium amenities to attract buyers. She was running a con in both directions, scaring existing residents into selling, while using James's property to attract new ones. Every transaction made her money. Every complaint drove the cycle. James sat in his study that evening, with Captain at his feet and the file drawer open. He pulled out the FOIA documents, the inspection reports, the attorney correspondence, the MLS printouts. He spread them across his desk and looked at them the way he used to look at case boards in the Marshal's office, connecting names, dates, actions, and motives, with the practiced eye of a man who spent 3 decades building cases that held up in federal court. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute. This was a scheme, and Patricia was at the center of it. He called Harlan the next morning. "I want to file everything. Harassment, defamation, tortious interference with property rights fraud, and real estate transactions. I want her to answer for every letter, every complaint, every commission she earned by scaring people with lies about my land." Harlan was quiet for a moment. Then, "We can file now and win, but if you wait, if you let her make one more move, you won't just win the lawsuit, you'll end her career." James leaned back in his chair. The ceiling fan turned slow overhead, pushing warm air through the room. "Wait, what kind of move?" he asked. "The kind where she does something so public and so illegal that no judge, no jury, and no licensing board can look the other way." James thought about that for a long time. Then he said, "I can wait." Harlan didn't have to wait long. Patricia's next move came dressed in a surveyor's vest and a clipboard. On a Wednesday morning in late March, James was in the barn brushing Duke when he heard the crunch of tires on the Oyster Shell Drive. He walked out and found a white pickup truck parked near his east fence line, the boundary between Whitfield and Palmetto Crest. A man in an orange reflective vest was hammering a wooden stake into the ground about 40 feet inside James's property line. James walked over. "Morning, what are you doing?" The man looked up, mid-30s nervous eyes, the expression of someone who knows he's standing on unstable ground in more ways than one. "Survey crew, got a work order for a boundary assessment." "Whose work order?" The man handed James a folded sheet of paper. It was printed on Palmetto Crest Estate's letterhead. The work order described a community boundary verification project and directed the survey crew to establish the correct property line between Palmetto Crest common areas and the adjacent agricultural parcel. It was signed by Patricia Davenport, President. The correct property line, according to Patricia's document, ran 40 feet west of the actual recorded boundary. 40 feet of James's land, including a section of his horse pasture and the eastern edge of his spring-fed pond, were marked on Patricia's map as Palmetto Crest Community Green Space. James looked at the stake the man had just driven into his pasture. Then he looked at the map. Then he looked at the surveyor. "Son, do you have a license?" The man swallowed. "I'm not the surveyor. I'm the crew. The surveyor signed off on the plat from the office." "Who's the surveyor?" "Ort, in boss." "Dennis Corley, Corley Land Services." James knew the name. Dennis Corley had done survey work for Greer Whitman Partners, the developer that built Palmetto Crest. He wasn't an independent surveyor conducting a neutral boundary assessment. He was a contractor working for the same developer whose subdivision was trying to absorb James's land. James pulled out his phone and took photographs of the stakes, the work order, the truck, and the crew member's face. Then he said calmly, the way a man speaks when he's been trained to de-escalate situations involving armed suspects and finds a clipboard almost quaint by comparison. "Pull those stakes, leave my property, and tell Mr. Corley that if he files a plat that moves my boundary line by a single inch, I'll have him in front of the South Carolina Board of Registration for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors before the ink dries." The crew left within 15 minutes. James called Harlan, who called the Board of Registration by lunch. The board confirmed that no authorized survey had been requested or approved for the Whitfield property. Dennis Corley's boundary assessment was an unsanctioned survey conducted on private land, without the owner's knowledge or consent, a violation of South Carolina Code Section 40-22-290 that carried a potential license suspension. But the real discovery came 2 days later, when Harlan obtained the Palmetto Crest HOA's financial records through a formal demand letter citing the South Carolina Nonprofit Corporation Act. Buried in the annual budget under Community Boundary Maintenance and Access Improvement was a line item charging every household $150 per year for shared boundary infrastructure upkeep. 122 households, 4 years, $73,200 collected. And the money hadn't been spent on any boundary infrastructure because there was no shared boundary infrastructure. The tree line between Whitfield and Palmetto Crest was a natural growth of live oaks, magnolias, and longleaf pine that nobody had planted, nobody maintained, and nobody owned, except James. The money went into the HOA's general operating fund. Harlan traced it from there into a discretionary account that Patricia controlled personally. Over 4 years, she'd written checks from that account totaling $61,000 for administrative services, consultant fees, and community liaison expenses. Every check was signed by Patricia. Every payee was either Patricia herself, her husband, or her sister. "Embezzlement," Harlan said, spreading the documents across his desk like a poker hand. "Clean documented 4-year embezzlement from a nonprofit homeowners association. This is a felony, James. Multiple felonies." James looked at the numbers. $73,000 stolen from 122 families who trusted Patricia to manage their community. Families who paid their dues on time, attended meetings when asked, and voted yes when she told them to. "Keep building," James said. "She's not done yet." James spent the next month building 2 things, a legal case and a physical boundary. The legal case was Harlan's masterwork. He compiled every violation letter, every county complaint, every FOIA response, every inspection report, every MLS, listing every financial record and every photograph into a single litigation file that weighed 11 pounds and told a story so clean it could have been a law school textbook. Harassment, defamation, real estate fraud, HOA fund embezzlement, unauthorized survey, trespass, tortious interference with property rights, each claim documented with dates, names, amounts, and evidence chains. Harlan also filed a formal complaint with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission. Patricia held license number 47823. The complaint detailed her pattern of manufacturing community panic about James's property, while simultaneously using his property as a selling point in her listings, a practice that the Commission's Code of Ethics describes as dual misrepresentation, and that carries mandatory license review and potential revocation. The physical boundary was James's project. He hired a licensed surveyor, a real one, not Dennis Corley, named Martha Haynes out of Hilton Head. Martha was 62 years old, had surveyed more low-country properties than anyone alive, and had a reputation for accuracy that bordered on religion. She spent 3 days on the Whitfield estate with transit equipment and GPS units marking every corner, every boundary line, every legal description, point with precision stakes and orange flagging tape. When she finished, she handed James a certified plat map and a boundary report. His property line was exactly where the 1927 deed said it was 40 feet east of where Patricia's fake survey had placed it. Martha's plat was filed with the Beaufort County Register of Deeds the same afternoon. Then James built his fence. Not a decoration, not a suggestion, a fence. He hired a contractor out of Walterboro named Buddy Phelps, who'd been building agricultural fencing in the Low Country since Carter was president. Buddy brought a 3-man crew and 800 linear feet of 6-foot-tall welded steel pipe. fencing the kind rated for livestock containment, painted flat black set in concrete footings, 18 inches deep. Every 20 feet, a steel post sunk into the ground like an exclamation point. Every section plumb and level, built to code, built to last, and built exactly on the surveyed property line, not an inch over, not an inch under. James also installed a camera system, 8 weatherproof cameras with infrared capability motion, activation, and cloud storage backup. 4 cameras covered the fence line, 2 covered the front gate, 1 covered the horse barn, 1 covered the driveway from the main road to the house. Every camera recorded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in resolution sharp enough to read a license plate from 200 feet. The fence went up in 4 days. Patricia watched from the Palmetto Crest side, standing on the HOA's walking trail, with her leather planner pressed against her chest, and a look on her face that James recognized from 28 years of federal service, the look of someone watching their plan close down around them like a room getting smaller. She didn't say anything to James directly. She didn't have to. That evening, the Protect Palmetto Crest Facebook page exploded with 37 posts about the prison wall that had gone up overnight. Patricia posted a photo of the fence from an angle that made it look menacing with the caption, "Is this what community looks like?" James didn't have Facebook. He didn't need it. He had cameras, a surveyor's plat, a licensed contractor's invoice, and a litigation file that was now 12 pounds and growing. Buddy Phelps stopped by, a week after the fence was finished, to check the tension on the corner posts. He stood at the east fence line, looked across at the Palmetto Crest houses gleaming in the afternoon sun, and shook his head. "Way, she's going to do something stupid," Miss Buddy said. James nodded. "That's what I'm counting on." Patricia's response came in stages, each one louder and more reckless than the last. Stage 1 was the petition. She circulated a document through Palmetto Crest, demanding that the Beaufort County Planning Commission rezone James's property from agricultural to residential, which would effectively prohibit his horses, his barn, and his way of life. She collected 71 signatures in 2 weeks. Most people signed because Patricia told them it would protect their home values. A few signed because they were genuinely worried. None of them knew that rezoning a private property against the owner's wishes requires a public hearing, a supermajority commission vote, and evidence of a legitimate public interest, and that "I don't like my neighbor's horses" doesn't qualify under South Carolina law. The Planning Commission received the petition. A staff attorney reviewed it. It was rejected in 6 business days with a 1-paragraph letter that said in language so bureaucratically polite it almost hid the contempt underneath. The commission finds no basis for a zoning change to the subject property. The current agricultural designation is consistent with historical use and existing county land use plans. Stage 2 was the blockade. James's property had 1 public road access, a gravel lane that connected the Whitfield front gate to County Road 9. The first 200 yards of that lane ran along the eastern edge of Palmetto Crest's entrance boulevard. It wasn't shared land. James had a recorded access easement filed with the county in 1927, granting the Whitfield estate permanent right-of-way along that corridor. Patricia had the HOA's landscaping crew install 3 decorative concrete planters, each weighing about 800 pounds and filled with ornamental grasses directly in the path of James's access lane. She positioned them during a weekday afternoon when James was in Charleston for a medical appointment, spacing them just far enough apart that a sedan could weave through if the driver was patient, but a truck pulling a horse trailer couldn't pass at all. James came home to find his access lane turned into an obstacle course designed by a woman who measured success in the number of people she could inconvenience. He didn't move the planters. He called the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Cole Mitchell responded. Cole was 34 years old, built like a middle linebacker who'd traded the field for a badge, and he carried himself with the measured calm of a man who'd learned patience from someone who demanded it. That someone was James Beaumont. 6 years earlier, Cole Mitchell had been a junior deputy assigned to a federal county joint task force targeting fugitives in the Low Country. James was the senior U.S. Marshal running the task force. For 18 months, Cole worked beside James on warrant operations, learning how to clear a building, how to read body language at a doorway, how to stay calm when the person on the other side of the threshold had nothing left to lose. James taught him everything the academy couldn't. That authority isn't a volume knob, that the best enforcement is the kind that never raises its voice, and that the moment you lose your temper is the moment you lose the case. When Cole decided to leave federal work and apply to the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office, James wrote his recommendation letter. He wrote it on Marshal's service letterhead, and the sheriff told Cole later that the letter was the reason he got hired. Cole pulled up to the Whitfield gate, saw the planters, and walked the scene for exactly 90 seconds. Then he photographed each planter, measured the gap between them, and confirmed that the obstruction violated James's recorded easement. Marshal Beaumont. Cole said he still used the title the way a soldier uses sergeant for a man who earned it decades ago. These need to move. I'll file the report tonight. If they're not gone in 72 hours, the county will remove them and bill the HOA. The planters were gone the next morning. Patricia had them moved before sunrise, like a thief cleaning up a crime scene in reverse. But she wasn't done. She was nowhere close to done. It happened on a Saturday in June. James was on his veranda at 7 in the evening, the way he was most evenings when the heat broke and the river breeze picked up. Captain was asleep under the rocking chair. Duke and Pearl stood in the far pasture, silhouetted against a sky turning from gold to copper. James had a glass of sweet tea and a Robert Caro biography open on his knee, and for the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about Patricia Davenport. She was thinking about him. At 6:53 p.m., Patricia Davenport picked up her phone and dialed 911. The call lasted 2 minutes and 47 seconds. The Beaufort County dispatch recording, which James obtained 31 days later through a FOIA request, captured every word. L1 911, what is your emergency? Yes, my name is Patricia Davenport. I'm the president of the Palmetto Crest Estates Homeowners Association. I need officers at the Whitfield property immediately. There is a man on the property who does not belong here. He may be armed. I've seen him walking the grounds multiple times this week, and tonight he's sitting on the porch like he owns the place. I want him removed. Get him out. And ma'am, can you describe the individual? Male, late 50s, medium build. He's been trespassing on this property for weeks. The estate has been vacant, the previous owner passed away, and no one has claimed it. This man has no right to be there. Please send someone immediately. I don't feel safe. Is he threatening you or anyone else? He could be armed. He has a dog. Just get him out, now. She hung up. Everything she said was a lie, every word. The property was not vacant. The previous owner had not passed away. The previous owner was the Aldrich Whitfield Trust, and James had purchased the property from the trust 3 years earlier. James was not a trespasser. He was the legal owner, sitting on his own porch, reading a book in a house he'd paid $5.2 million for. Patricia knew all of this. She'd met him. She'd stood at his gate. She'd mailed him letters addressed to this property. She'd filed county complaints listing him as the property owner. She knew his name. She knew where he lived. And she told the 911 dispatcher none of it. What she told them was designed to do one thing: bring armed officers to the property of a man she wanted gone, using a story calculated to make those officers arrive with their hands on their weapons. 2 patrol units responded. Dispatch classified the call as a possible armed trespass priority response. Deputies were advised that the subject might be armed and that the property was believed to be vacant. James heard the gravel crunch before he saw the lights. 2 Beaufort County Sheriff's cruisers came up the Live Oak Alley at moderate speed. No sirens, but light bars on, painting the Spanish moss in alternating blue and red like a 4th of July show staged by the wrong department. Captain lifted his head and looked at the driveway with mild curiosity. James set down his book and his tea. He stood up, not fast, not alarmed. The way a man stands when he's spent 28 years on the other side of that exact approach and knows that the most important thing you can do in the next 10 seconds is nothing sudden. 2 deputies stepped out of the first cruiser. James didn't recognize the younger one, a kid maybe 25, hand resting on his duty belt, with the nervous energy of someone who hasn't done enough of these to feel calm about them. The second deputy stepped out of the driver's side, flashlight in hand, and swept the beam across the veranda. The light passed over the rocking chair, the sweet tea, the sleeping dog, and stopped on James's face. Deputy Cole Mitchell lowered his flashlight. His shoulders dropped exactly 1 inch, the shift from tactical posture to recognition that only another trained officer would notice. And then he smiled. "Good to see you, sir." The young deputy's hand was still on his belt. Cole waved him down with a small gesture, 2 fingers palm flat, the universal law enforcement signal for stand down. "It's fine." "Marshal Beaumont," Cole said, climbing the veranda steps like he was arriving for Sunday dinner instead of a priority call. "You having a quiet evening?" James said. Cole looked at the book, the tea, the dog. He looked at the house, the 3-story Georgian revival with the 12-foot ceilings and the river view that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. He looked at James standing in a flannel shirt and worn jeans, the most relaxed armed trespass suspect in the history of Beaufort County. "Sir, we received a call reporting an armed trespasser at this address. Caller described the property as vacant and the occupant as unauthorized." James nodded slowly. The caller wouldn't happen to be a blonde woman in a BMW who lives next door. Cole didn't answer that. Directly, he was too professional, but the corner of his mouth moved in a way that said everything his badge wouldn't let him say out loud. The young deputy stepped forward. "Sir, can you verify that you're the property owner?" James reached into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt, slowly, deliberately, the way he'd taught Cole to instruct people during warrant service, and pulled out a folded document. His deed. He'd started carrying a copy the same week the violation letters began, because 28 years in federal law enforcement teaches you that the best evidence is the kind you can produce in 3 seconds. Cole looked at the deed for about 10 seconds. The young deputy looked at it for 30, reading every line like he was studying for an exam. When he finished, he looked up at James with an expression that shifted from suspicion to embarrassment to something close to apology in the space of a single breath. "Sir, we'll eat," the young deputy said. "I'm sorry for the disturbance." "Don't be sorry," James said. "You did your job. You responded to a call and verified the facts. That's exactly how it's supposed to work." Cole folded his arms and looked out at the driveway where the cruiser lights were still painting the live oaks in slow blue sweeps. "Marshal, I'm going to need to document this as a false report. The caller provided information she knew to be inaccurate. That's a criminal offense under South Carolina law." "I know," James said. "Section 16-17-722, filing a false police report, misdemeanor up to 30 days, and a fine." Cole almost smiled. "You could have let me cite the statute, sir." "Old habits." Cole wrote his report on the hood of his cruiser, while the young deputy stood nearby, still looking slightly shell-shocked by the realization that he'd been dispatched to arrest the former Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Southern District of South Carolina for the crime of sitting on his own porch. Before Cole left, he walked back to the veranda steps. The light bar was off now. The driveway was dark again, except for the porch lights and the fireflies starting to spark in the tree line. "Sir," Cole said, "I don't know what she's been doing, but I know it didn't start tonight. The dispatcher told me this address has had 7 complaints in 9 months, all from the same source. That's a pattern." "It is," James said. "You building a case?" "I built the case 6 months ago, Cole. Now I'm just letting her add to it." Cole nodded. He understood. He'd learned that patience from the man standing in front of him. The next morning, Sunday, James called Harlan Griggs. Harlan picked up on the second ring, which meant he'd been expecting the call. "She did it," James said. "Tell me." James told him. The 911 call, the false report. The lies about the property being vacant, about James being unauthorized. The fact that Patricia had met him, corresponded with him, and filed complaints naming him as the owner, all of which proved she knew exactly who he was and fabricated every word of that call. Harlan was quiet for 8 seconds. Then he said, "That's the move. That's what we were waiting for. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense, and it opens the door to every civil claim we've been holding: harassment, defamation, abuse of process, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Combined with the embezzlement and the real estate fraud, we're looking at a case that will end her in every direction, criminal, civil, and professional. File it Monday, James said. I already drafted the complaint, Harlan said. I wrote it 2 months ago. I just needed her to give me the last page. Harlan Griggs filed the civil complaint on Monday morning. 47 pages, 7 causes of action. Named defendants Patricia Davenport individually and in her capacity as HOA president. Todd Davenport, her husband, who sat on the Palmetto Crest Architectural Review Committee and had co-signed 3 of the fraudulent HOA checks, and the Palmetto Crest Estates Homeowners Association as an entity. The causes of action read like a greatest hits album of everything Patricia had done wrong. Harassment through repeated frivolous complaints, defamation through false public statements about James's property, tortious interference with property rights, unauthorized survey, and trespass real estate fraud through dual misrepresentation in MLS, listings embezzlement of HOA funds, and abuse of process through the filing of a false police report. Total damages sought $1.4 million. That number included treble damages for the trespass and property damage under South Carolina, law compensatory damages for the harassment campaign, and disgorgement of every commission Patricia had earned using James's property as a selling point. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Office filed criminal charges the same week. 1 count of filing a false police report, the 911 call, 1 count of misuse of emergency services, and after Harlan's complaint drew the attention of the county solicitor's office 3 additional counts of embezzlement from a nonprofit organization, the HOA fund theft. Patricia was served at her home on a Wednesday afternoon. The process server later told Harlan that she opened the door in a white linen pantsuit, saw the papers, and said, "This is a misunderstanding." It was the same word she'd used when the paving contractor confronted her. It was the same word she'd used when code enforcement cleared James's property. It was the same word she'd been using for 4 years to cover every lie, every theft, and every abuse of the position her neighbors trusted her with. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a reckoning. The HOA board held an emergency meeting 5 days after the complaint was filed. Nora Pemberton, the quiet secretary who had been cataloging Patricia's behavior for years, presented the financial records she'd been safeguarding. She laid out every fraudulent check, every phantom budget line item, every dollar that went from the community's treasury into Patricia's personal accounts. The room was silent except for the sound of 109 homeowners realizing they'd been robbed by the woman they'd elected to protect them. The vote to remove Patricia from the board was unanimous. 109-0. She wasn't present for the vote. Her attorney had advised her not to attend. The South Carolina Real Estate Commission suspended Patricia's license pending investigation. The complaint Harlan had filed detailed 14 transactions in which she'd misrepresented James's property as a community amenity, a violation so clear that the commission's enforcement division didn't need to deliberate. Her license was suspended within 30 days. The civil case settled 7 months later. Patricia's insurance carrier, the HOA's directors and officers policy, paid $680,000. Patricia personally paid an additional $92,000 from the sale of her BMW and the liquidation of a brokerage account her husband had maintained. Total recovery $772,000. The criminal case took longer. Patricia pleaded no contest to the false police report charge and 1 count of embezzlement. She received 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record that would follow her into every background check for the rest of her life. She put her house on the market the week after sentencing. It sold in 41 days. She did not collect the commission. James donated a portion of the settlement to the Beaufort County Sheriff's Benevolent Association. The rest went into a trust for the Whitfield Estates maintenance, the live oaks, the barn, the spring-fed pond, the gravel drive that led from the gate to the house through a canopy of moss and light. Cole Mitchell still stops by on patrol. He parks at the front gate, walks up the alley, and sits on the veranda while James pours coffee. They don't talk about Patricia. They talk about the river, the horses, and the way the morning light hits the water when the mist is still rising. Captain sleeps under the rocking chair. Duke stands in the pasture. Pearl ignores everyone. The mockingbirds argue about territory. And the gate stays closed.
And that's the story of James, a man who spent 28 years protecting other people and then had to protect himself from a woman who thought a gold-embossed letterhead was the same thing as authority. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Patricia didn't lose because James was wealthy or connected. She lost because she confused power with control. Real power is knowing what you own, documenting what being done to you, and having the patience to let someone dig their own grave while you hold those shovels receipt. Jim didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he didn't post on social media. He fight, he documented, he waited, and when she finally crossed the criminal line, the case was already built. If you're dealing with someone like Patricia, someone who uses rules as weapons and authority as a personality, remember this, you don't have to fight them, you just have to outlast them. And the law is very, very patient. If this story hit home, drop a comment, tell me what would you have done differently. If this story hits home, drop a comment, tell me what would you have done differently. Would you have waited for the 911 call? Would you have filed sooner? Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around, because next time I got a story about an HOA president who tried to condemn a veteran's cabin. She didn't know his grandfather built the road the entire neighborhood drives on. You're not going to want to miss that one.